So with that, I am going to do apologies for absence. I have some apologies, so do you want?
Councillor Minute Vokes, Councillor Ian Thomas.
And I would just like to say Cabinet Member Julia Jenkins is unwell at the moment and will not be joining us. Any declarations of interest? No? So with that, we will go to agenda item. Why am I not working? Sorry everyone, it just seems that my computer just doesn't want to conform with me today. So we'll go to agenda item 3, which is the annual report, social services, complaints, representation and compliments 23-24. The report author is Gaynor Lewis from the complaints department. So I'd like to welcome Gaynor here today. Thank you ever so much for attending, and I will hand the chair over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so please, do you want to introduce it or do?
Just quickly introduce then. Gaynor obviously very kindly wrote the report and to the great detail. It's 23-24. So you'll see the comparative data in the report from 22-23, and it's positive in that complaints have reduced. So that the details obviously in the report. Gaynor can go through the detail. What I will highlight, and I think I sort of flagged it, I'm not sure if you picked it up, Claire, because I appreciate you took on the chair last minute, and with Gaynor today that the press or media picked up the report, and there was some sort of negative comms about it on Saturday. I think they sort of picked up sort of different headlines about timescales of how complaints are dealt with, but I think the report is quite positive. So I just wanted to highlight that, and perhaps Gaynor, when she goes through the detail, you might have questions from there. So I'll hand over to Gaynor.
Hello. Okay, I'll go through the Scrutiny Committee report first, which is a summary. Gives us a quick insight into the complaints that we've had. As Lisa has highlighted, there has been a reduction this year as opposed to the complaints of where we were last year. So there's been a reduction from a total of 145 to 122. The reduction has been quite significant in adult services, but I will comment that we did have an increase last year, which was one particular point which has been addressed now, and it's been reflected in the reduction in the adult services for this year. So moving on, if I go through the actual annual report. The first number of pages is very similar to previous years, which gives you the background to the complaints, our aims, and how the processes that we adhere to, which are the Welsh Government guidelines. So we adhere to the Welsh Government guidelines for addressing complaints. What we have done, which we've done previously from requests from councillors, is to try and expand on the themes that we've had in order to give a more broader insight into where the complaints have arisen from. So if I go straight through to the stats, you'll see that Children's Services, we had 84 stage ones, and 35 in adult services, no stage 2s in adult services, and 3 with children's services. I think as we go down this chart, which is on page 9 for myself, you'll see that the most important data we look at is upheld and not upheld, because these are the ones where we can pick up on things that are actually going wrong. 84 complaints in stage 1, and out of that, 53 of them were not upheld. So I think it's important to know that we have a very open gateway to our complaints procedure for anybody to make a complaint, and they have that right. They have that right to have a perception of something they don't understand or how they felt they were spoken to. But then following an investigation into the complaint, this is how we would come up with the outcomes that we have. Investigation not merited would be perhaps they complaining about something that wouldn't fall within our procedures anyway. Could be court, it could be something in a legal arena. Investigation discontinued is where sometimes that complaint, it was only perhaps a case management issue, and we've been able to address it through through quite a quick process, not the complaints. An investigation withdrawn is when the complainant themselves have withdrawn from the complaint. In adult services, out of the 35, we had 20 not upheld, 9 upheld. And then stage 2, out of the 3 that were escalated to stage 2 in children's services, 2 of them were then withdrawn. So we try and provide as much information as we can as possible, so you can have a clear picture on the amount of complaints and concerns that we're having through, even those that are withdrawn after we've started going through the complaint process. If we go on to page 10 for myself, is what does the data tell us? The above table and chart reflects the number of formal complaints submitted. However, in complaints, we do receive other correspondence. They might not always be complaints, and the requests for information, inquiries, and compliments even, which we come to later on in the report. We are encouraged by the Ombudsman to record as much as possible of what comes in to our department, and this is where sometimes they can be just general correspondence, which still takes significant work for the department, but they wouldn't actually be categorised as a complaint. Okay, so the charts that tells us then where we are and where we've been for the last couple of years. There has been an increase in the amount of complaints we received, but I see this as a positive because it means that we are providing the information for people to make complaints. We make sure that it's a very open forum. They can complain via the telephone, in person or online. A majority of our complaints, I would say, comes in online anyway. Right, if we go on to the increase in demand has impacted on perhaps our complexity of complaints. So what we are seeing is some of the complaints that we have through do have a number of strands to it. Usually they are communication, relationship with professionals, or the services provided. But we have to make clear that a complaint is not an opportunity to challenge a professionally made decision, and this is some of the conversations that we have with complainants that come through to our department. Continuous improvement, we're looking at the themes on my page 15, and you can see from children's services sometimes a lack of information or communication. So sometimes it can be that they don't feel that people have got back to them, or they haven't been communicated. Sometimes the complainant's expectations can be quite high on this, and they expect an instant response. This is why a number of the complaints then are not upheld, because the social workers have responded, but perhaps not instantly as the complainant have requested. Again, staff issues, that would be around the relationship sometimes with the social worker, and this is why these are quite high in children's services. As I said previously, the difference between children's services and adult services is that usually the public want us in their life in adult services, but they don't in children's services, and sometimes this puts a strain straight away on the relationship between the parents and the social worker. Around these, we tend to hold a number of meetings, and these have worked very well. The managers are very engaging, very positive approach to meeting with the parents in children's services who makes these complaints in order to try and improve the relationship, because we can't be changing social workers, just because they're not getting on with our social worker. We have to try and work at it so we can improve it. And, again, if we go back to the amount of not upheld complaints, we can see that these meetings and processes that we do during the complaints procedure are working, positively. If I go on to page 16 of mine, complexity and habitual vexatious complainants, we have got one who's subject to our vexatious policy at the moment. It takes a lot for us. It might not seem a lot, but there is a high criteria to make somebody subject to a vexatious policy, and it's usually because they have completely exhausted all avenues for the complaint procedure, but they continue to raise the same issues all the time. Unfortunately, in addition to that, we've had to take a number of steps with regard to managing people's correspondence and communication, and that's due to verbal abuse, personal, slander comments that have been made. And I got to say that legal are very supportive. I fall under Simon Johnson Legal, and they're very positive. We do try and take, as do the Ombudsman encourage us, a zero tolerance to violent, abusive comments from members of the public. Unfortunately, it's on the increase, and it has resulted in a number of letters that we've had to send out to members of the public, actually banning them from attending the Civic Centre due to their threats of violence and abuse. But we continue to work with that, and we have got to the point with some where they have tailored in their behaviour, and we review it after 6 months, and if they sort of behave as we behave and be able to present themselves more politely, then we will lift that ban then, and or any restrictions that they might have on there. So going through then to the upheld and not upheld, you can see from the page 18 of mine, stage ones, there is a significant amount of complaints not upheld. That's because maybe we've been able to address the issues or that we find in that, that the complaints that we are having through are quite premature, sometimes in raising concerns. So those were the those are the sort of not reflected in the not upheld. Again, investigation withdrawn, that's down to the complainant. They might instantly ring us, and then when we try and pick up the complaint later on, they sometimes, once they've had their initial rant, then they're happy to withdraw the complaint and work again with social services. The best page for me comes to the start of page 19, when it's compliments, and we've had a significant amount of compliments through, and we've tried to reflect them. Some of them, we can't put all of them onto the report, but we try and put as many as we can, and we will continue to encourage staff, managers, any compliments that they have, that they send them through to us so that we can document it. Any compliment that comes through from social services is shared with the director, who then sort of responds very positively, and we all like to read a compliment. So again, I would encourage the staff to pass them through. Again, lessons learned. All complaints, as cliche as they sound, is to try and learn something from it. We were, that person was in a position where they felt they had to put a complaint. So whether their complaint was upheld or not, we still like to learn from them and see how we can go going forward. So on page 22, I've put some examples down of complaints and lessons learned from the complaints as well. And then it comes through to our conclusion then. And again, I'd like to personally thank Sarah Thornton, who works with me in complaints. I couldn't be able to do this job without her support. And again, the staff that are always, as much as they probably don't want to see me or don't want to hear from me, they always take a positive approach to the complaints, which hopefully will continue to result in positive outcomes for residents of Merthyr.
We start, can I just welcome Councillor Declan Salmon, and can I just say, Councillor Salmon, obviously if you can keep your camera on and muted unless you want to speak and raise your hand, that would be much appreciated, so thank you for attending. So questions? Thank you, Councillor Tevi. Here we go.
This vexatious complainant, have they been to the Ombudsman? Oh well, yes.
Completely exhausted all avenues. There's and it's the same complaint, and it's the same complaint that has been going on since 2014. To give you sort of an indication of how long we've been. The voluminous emails continue to come in, but the point of contact is complaints. So when we do make them subject to vexatious, they're not, unless it's a case of emergency, they can telephone, but otherwise all the communication comes through complaints and we file them all through then. So we probably have, on average, still about four emails a week.
Oh, from the vexation.
Yeah,
Oh, blimey.
yes, yeah. But any what we indicate and what the Ombudsman support us on is that if somebody is made the subject of vexatious, or even being advised that the emails are to be managed more closely, we won't continue to acknowledge or respond to matters that have previously been addressed. So for us, it's just a filing sort of process then, not actually responding each time.
Thanks.
I can see that Councillor Deborah Salmon has got his Declan, can you hear us?
I can now, Chair.
There we are. Over to you, Councillor Salmon.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Chair. Gaynor, question for you. I've been a member of the Social Services Scrutiny Committee for quite a number of years, and it's again been mentioned in this report about the lack of communication. Do we need to manage people's expectations? Is there written information available for those interacting with social services so they can be given clear information on the process relating to this social services case? You say we want to learn from things, but I don't know if we are.
So you mean regarding the outcome, the amount of complaints regarding communication? Is that what you mean, Councillor?
Yeah, because it seems to be a common theme, to be honest, every year. I think I've been on the Social Services Committee now for, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years. And it's something that comes up in the same report every year.
Yeah, yeah. It's difficult, I think, to manage the member of public expectations, because I think the way I look at it, and we try and take that, a fair approach, is that for them, this is just their case. So this is just the only thing that possibly, whereas for the social worker, they might have a number of cases going on. So I think sometimes, and this is why we look at how many are upheld from there. It's very difficult to manage people's expectations, because I think we're in a society now where people want instant responses with email, with most things in life, whether they're ordering something or whether they want to speak to somebody. They don't understand why people are not getting back to them straight away. Some of the cases that I have looked at, and we have had a meeting about, and they said the social worker's not getting back to us. And it was along the lines of, perhaps they rang at 11 o'clock and nobody got back to them by the end of that day. And I said, well, that is an unrealistic time scale to expect somebody to be getting back to you if they haven't promised. The difficulty sometimes is this: we overpromise and underdeliver. But I haven't seen many cases through the complaints that I've seen where we've done that, to be honest. I think it's just the expectation of that person wanting, because of mobile phones, instant responses. I mean, there was one case where we met with them and he said, oh, I tried to ring 26 times. And I said, well, surely, in one day, you're trying to ring a person 20, they have other cases to deal with. And if they say they're going to get back to you within a certain time. So I think, if anything, we need to learn going from there is just, under promise. If you think you're going to get back to them by the end of that day, say you're going to get back to them by the end of the next day. Because, of course, I suppose it would be the same for us, wasn't it? If we waited for somebody to ring us back, and they say they're going to ring us back that day, they want that call. But I haven't seen many of these that have been upheld.
Okay, I just wondered, I appreciate everything you said. I can completely understand it, because as councillors, we do deal with residents quite often on a lot of different matters, and sometimes there is that expectation that we are going to get back to them straight away as well, which is not always possible, and a lot of time we are waiting for from responses from other organisations and other departments. So just wondering, is it feasible to put some written information together to be able to give to people and to help manage that expectation?
I mean, as far as our complaints responses are concerned, we do detail that down. So we do put down where I think it's very difficult for us to put expectations on responses for social workers, because I think, I mean, maybe Lisa can have answer this one, but I think it would be very difficult for us to put a time scale. We have a time scale with complaints of when we will get back to them. And in the absence of myself, my colleague Sarah's there. So we have 2 working days with social services, 5 working days with our corporate. So we do sort of respond back within that time scale. But I think it's quite difficult to to manage expectations when people's expectations usually are quite high and instant.
Okay, thank you, Gaynor, and thank you, Chair.
Can I just add, I suppose, on the back of what Gaynor has said, really, there is an issue, obviously, that has come up time and time again in complaints, but we can't control, I guess, what people complain about. And I think, yes, we probably could put something out there, but not one size fits all, because some of those, one child case is going to be very different to another child case. Sometimes, like you said, we're waiting for health to report to us, or we might be working with housing. We're working with the court on lots of circumstances, so there could be a guardian, independent person, involved with the family. So sometimes we can't provide information families want. They may want a response within 24 hours, but we may not have the information back from the other professional. But I think, showing where it says complaints not upheld, then, I think we're doing a lot of good things. And I think we need to highlight that. Where we can, obviously, we'll respond as quickly as we can. But, again, is right. Social workers haven't just got one case. They've got several cases. And, if a family member emails at 10 o'clock in the morning, that social worker might be out and about all day on a child protection case, or maybe caught up with something else, in which case they may not look at their emails till the following morning. I appreciate that they should have an out of office on, and if it's urgent, there should be something on their emails around, their manager to contact in the case of an emergency. And I suppose that's something for us to learn, that we should encourage our staff to do that. If they're out and about, then there's another person to contact. So we'll certainly take that on board.
Thank you, Lisa.
I got to move across. Okay. Yeah, it's really a follow-on from Declan's question. Really. I think these days there's an expectation of responding because of mobile phones and emails. Years ago, I show my age now, it was letters would be the correspondence, and that could take days and days then, really. But so it's an expectation, really. But also, expectations have to be reduced then by perhaps someone ringing up and not being told if the person isn't in, they'll ring you back later, is to say, to give them a more realistic time scale, as you said, Gaynor. With regards to those 30, I'm not sure if I missed it. How many of those were upheld on the communications?
I don't have that breakdown, I'm afraid. Yeah, that would be more. It would be more of a work. We could look at it.
Yeah.
We could look at it going forward next year. That would be. But for the stats that we provide, because we provide the stats to the Ombudsman every quarter, and then we expand on it for the annual report. But I mean, that is something that we can look at next year, that we're looking at how many of them are not upheld. So that's certainly something,
Thanks, Gaynor. Chair's okay for another question, and it's about the Ombudsman, it is.
Yeah.
My recollection over the 7 years I think I've been on, Declan and I have been on quite a long time. Don't recall, would it be within this report that any Ombudsman complaints will be recorded?
No, we have a separate report for the Ombudsman.
I thought it was that. I wasn't quite sure whether it would show up in your as well.
Yeah.
And that will be the third stage in effect, really, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And again, we don't have any control over how many complaints go to the Ombudsman.
No.
you know, that we haven't had any in the last financial year that were upheld against us.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think it's, again, as I sort of touched on earlier, the amount of work that's put on between a stage 1 and stage 2.
Yeah.
Our ratio to stage 2s is really low.
Yeah.
That's not because we refuse them, as because they could go to the Ombudsman and the Ombudsman can insist that we do a stage 2. It's about the amount of work that goes into stage 1. That's down to the staff, you know, to drill down really, and to manage people's expectations, but their desired outcomes as well, really. Yeah. And sometimes the desired outcomes can be unrealistic. So this is why the meetings are so productive, because it's a chance for them to come in and sit down and talk about things. You know, those that are in children's services can be scared. They can be very defensive, but it's a chance to sort of improve relationships, really. And I think that's reflected in one stage 2 out of 85 stage 1s.
Yeah. And the advice to go to Ombudsman would be after stage 2 then, Gaynor, isn't
After
it?
stage 2, it would be to the Ombudsman.
Yeah.
They can go to the Ombudsman at any point.
Yes.
But the Ombudsman would advise them that they
back.
have to exhaust our procedure before they would look at it.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. Final one. I don't know if you want to have an opportunity, Lisa. I didn't see the newspaper or the reporting. Do you want to address that? Would you address it to us so we are aware of it, perhaps, what it was and what your response would be?
I think the story, if the headline is about timescales and us responding to complaints, which I think sort of Gaynor's gone through as she's talked about the report.
Yeah.
The general story is sort of taking you through the detail of the report. So the headline is probably the thing that pops up, and then when you read the detail. But I think it goes back to that, the communication element and social workers responding. So there's sort of criticism around that, but I think we probably discussed that in more detail, sort of from the questions that you've given.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily about us, you know, not meeting the timescales, because I think generally we do, but sometimes some of the complaints that come in are quite complex. So I think you'll see identified in one of the learning things is that if we've got a complaint where a number of departments are involved, then we try to pull meetings together with all those officers at an early stage so we can address all the complaint rather than have delay because we're waiting for perhaps housing or cots or, you know, children's services to do that. So that's one of the things we've learned from this, is that if we pull a meeting together early on at stage 1, and obviously, like Gaynor says, Sarah Thornton is excellent. She helps minute those meetings and pulls, you know, those things together and, you know, manages the timescales and things. We then respond much quicker. So, you know, we've learned lessons, like, if you like, from some of the complaints. It is difficult. You know, we've got social workers who are out and about. And, you know, sometimes Gaynor and Sarah are chasing, sort of, you're making sure that we meet the timescales. But, you know, obviously it's to our benefit if we respond as quickly as we can. So I think, you know, the report is really positive. You know, you only have to look at the compliments we get. Well, I mean, unfortunately, we couldn't put all of them in there, otherwise the report would be much longer. But, you know, it's a week doesn't go by when I get a compliment, whether it be adult services or children's services, and they always copy me in, to be fair, so that I can thank, you know, and send an email to the social worker or care worker, you know, a positive message. But we get some really lovely messages through about the support and services they have. And I think, you know, that is sort of highlighted in the report. And I don't think we were very good at that in the past, but I think we are much better now at shouting how, you know, some of the positive messages we get as well.
Can I just add about the newspaper article? There was no mention in there about how many were not upheld. So I think it's, you know, I think it's encouraging that people are making complaints because that is their perception of, you know, and we would encourage, you know, any complaints that come through to the councillors, they are directed to the complaints procedure to make sure we take them through the 2 stages and we're satisfied we're not repeating ourselves then.
Yeah. Thank you.
I've sent the actual cut-in, it's not the cut-in, I've sent the link to your email address. I've sent it to yourself, Councillor Tubby and Councillor Salmon as well, and also to Lisa and Gaynor for them to be able to read, so I've just got it in front of me. I have got some questions for this. I'll try not to keep on. My first one, because I was looking within the process of the stage 2 complaint. So with the stage 2 complaint, you've got that 25 days. Is it 25 days to
We've got up to
be
6
able
months.
to?
6 months is the time scale, and that's a realistic time scale, because with the stage 2, with social services, it has to go to an independent investigator. If it's a children's, you have to have an independent investigator and an independent person. So we have to appoint them. There's a small group of independent investigators out there that we all, as complaints officers throughout Wales, utilise. And because there's a very few, that there's currently can be a waiting list for them. So the Ombudsman wouldn't criticise us if, especially if we have habitual complainers who have possibly been down the stage 2 process before. They will perhaps not want the same investigator. They'd want a different investigator. So we can have sometimes a waiting list, I think. I know other organisations have got about because of the amount of stage 2s they're doing, I've got about a 4-month waiting list.
Okay, because that was one of my questions, how many people are investigating with a stage 2 formal complaint. Can I just ask you, and this is me being, pardon my ignorance, with a stage 2 complaint, would a member of staff have to be suspended while an investigation went on?
That not within our remit. I mean, a stage 2 investigator, a stage 2 investigator is not there to hire or fire. He's not there to recommend. What he's looking at is this is why we have to be quite clear although the Welsh Government guidelines state that a complainant can escalate their complaint to stage 2. What we have got within our complaint process, which is again within the guidelines, that the complaints officer and the complainant both have to agree what's being escalated. So an independent investigator is not there to fire anyone. So if the complaint is regarding that's not the purpose of a stage 2. It's not there to get by any means any court arena issues, and it's not there to challenge any professionally made decisions. So when you drill down on somebody's desired outcome from a stage 2, it's usually going to be one of those. It's very rare that it falls out without that, and that's why we go back then again to those meetings. And we, if a desired outcome is that they're not happy with the social worker, they're not happy with a person, we tend to iron these out in the meetings. Usually they're attended by principal managers, team managers, and usually we've been able to address them through that way. But an investigator will not recommend,
Yeah, I mean, I think going with my line of work, we would potentially be suspended. And why I was asking was, I just wanted to make sure that if you did have suspensions, that person is fully supported, because a lot of the time, there's a lot of cases where complaints or people are under investigation and they really haven't done anything, and they are suspended from their job, whilst under investigation and pending an outcome. And I would just like to think, that anyone who ever is suspended for whatever reason does have that full support of they've got that liaison person that offers them that sort of comfort and support.
I mean, if it was something that fell within gross misconduct, that would be an HR issue, not for our complaints process.
Yeah, I think the complaints process I'm looking at is more because I can see some of the complaints that I've seen, and they are they can be quite nasty about people, especially the person. Yeah, so I know, with my line of work, unfortunately, it would be suspension while it's under investigation, and I didn't know the process.
No, I think
of that one with you.
I think if we had an allegation of that there was a safeguarding issue of harm to an adult or a child, then that's a different scenario. That's not a complaint. I mean, it is a complaint, but it's not dealt with as a complaint process. It's dealt with as safeguarding concern, and therefore HR advice would be sought, and there would be discussions as to whether that member of staff needed to be suspended pending an investigation. If that did happen, then obviously that member of staff would have independent support, because obviously, you know, there would have to be an investigation, and they would need to be supported while they weren't in the workplace. So, you know, there wouldn't be a presumption of guilt, because obviously there would have to be an independent investigation. But that's very different to the complaint process. Complaint process is usually somebody who is unhappy. Children's services, like Gaynor outlined in the report, people choose to, I suppose, work with adult services because they want support for various reasons. People don't always choose to work with children's services, and you know, some people are unhappy with outcomes from court, etc. And you know, it's quite an emotive subject if your child's been removed or your child's on the child protection register. So you know, you can understand people, you know, making a complaint, but that's very different process. If something came out of the complaint process that we had concerns about a member of staff, and that was highlighted in a, you know, stage 2 report, then obviously that would then maybe escalate down the HR process, and then you go into professional concerns. But I have to say, touch wood, that hasn't happened in the 10 years that I've been in post. You know, we've gone down the complaints process, the complaint's either upheld or not, and we'll have learning, you know. So, but if there was an allegation made, it wouldn't be a complaint, it would be go down professional concerns route.
Yeah, that sort of ties into my next question on page 27, where we had the staff issues, where, you know, we've got the table with the staff issues. So I was expecting the staff issues to be high anyway, because like you rightfully said, a lot of people don't want social service in their life, especially, you know, with the on the children's side of it. So you still obviously look into the issue, even though it's unfounded, yeah?
Any issue that's raised with us is always addressed and always looked at. Regardless of what the complaint is. Obviously, once it comes in as stage 1, then we would look at it, respond. If the person's not happy with the stage 1 response, then obviously there's that option to go to stage 2. But I have to say, I think we resolve most matters at stage 1. And we're able to sort of, you know, look at that process. Some of it is about relationships. You've got some social workers who've got different styles. Some might not like to work with a male social worker. They might rather have a female social worker. And we, you know, try and resolve those issues as best we can. But, you know, there's nothing that's not, we don't talk about or resolve because we want to learn from it.
Yeah, tying into that as well, our staff, when they have a monthly supervision, is one of the questions for a staff member if they're up to date with the whistleblowing policy. Because I know I have to confirm every month that I've read the whistleblowing policy and I'm up to date with it. And I was just wondering, you know, with staffing issues, because unfortunately sometimes there are issues with a staff member that somebody may feel that they do need to whistleblow. So I was wondering whether that's just one of the questions about the whistleblowing policy for staff.
So in residential, yes. So I suppose similar to the supervision you have, then that is discussed, because obviously, but you know, all policies and procedures are shared with staff. They're all on the internet for them to look at. The whistleblowing policy and the safeguarding policy were discussed at the safeguarding reference group, which managers sit on, and we encourage them to share those with staff, so they'd be shared in team meetings. It might not be a question that's asked at every supervision for a social worker, but certainly in residential it is.
Okay, thank you. Can I go to page 28, where we've got the verbal and written abuse from members of the public? What training is given to individuals to be able to deal with abuse? Because I've been on the other end of abuse, and let me tell you, it's not nice. And I think sometimes, you know, we do get to speak in supervisions and things like that, but sometimes you think, are people prepared for the abuse they're going to get? And how do we feel that we actually deal with staff that are being abused, you know, verbally or written abused?
I mean, as far as the issues that come through the complaints, and we do, you know, we have a number of contacts in complaints, not just with social services, but with corporate, that if they're having, you know, personal abuse of members of the staff, I have to say in the last couple of years, you know, within legal and under legal, we do take a zero tolerance approach to it. We will sort of contact them, we'll email them, when we've had issues in meetings where the behaviour has been, completely inappropriate, we will write them and tell them. And, I call them like wind your neck in letters, so, but that's how we label them and usually, they will adhere to it. If it goes too far, then we take it to another step then where we perhaps ban them from the building, and we have had to do that in the last year. But they do tend to sort of listen to it. They go out from legal, so it's not coming out from myself. It'll go out from my line manager, and they do. I mean, we do try and take this into account when we're in meetings with parents whose children within social services. We do take, they are human, they are probably frightened, and sometimes the best form of defence is attack, which is why we have these complaints then. They want to insist on changing the social worker. And going back to these, touch wood, these meetings, long may they continue, that they do have a positive outcome from them, because, all the principal managers who attend the meetings where they've got to this stage, they do try and explain, that, changing the social worker, it's not your social worker, it's your child's social worker, and they might have built up a relationship with that child. So we're not going to be changing social workers at the drop of a hat or anything. It have to be. But as far as training, we do encourage staff to contact us if they're having any abuse. We will write the letters out, and to be honest, they do tend to work really.
Yeah, because I was just wondering whether when an individual has abuse, whether it's written or verbal, do we, as a council, pinpoint them to? I believe we've got care plan. It's the thing that we can get support from. Is it care plan? Right, because we did used to use care plan, so I'm wondering whether we've changed. No, I'll have to look into that and find out. So I'm just wondering if the staff member that has had that verbal or written abuse, because it can be quite distressing to somebody, whether we pinpoint them to something that we are able to utilise as employees of the council. So I just wondered.
All I can say from the complaints point of view, that if we have a complaint in that's quite abusive about an individual, we never send it to them. We send it to their manager. So it's sort of funneled down from there really. The social worker would never come to a meeting where we expect it to be volatile. We wouldn't put them in that situation. So the meetings are always held with myself, Sarah taking minutes, and usually the principal manager or the team manager. So we try and protect them from it that way. It's difficult, I suppose, to in the nature of the job that you have, is that is going to be. But we think, as far as the complaints are concerned, we don't send them to the staff members.
And we've never had to have police involvement.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. We had police involvement with an individual where we were in a complaints meeting, and he took it too far, and that's the only time. So I've only called the police once. Yeah. And he got banned then from the civic. So not a situation you want really. No. But a lot of the time when they are quite volatile and they can be a little bit, they will apologise after. It's usually like a sort of knee-jerk reaction. But only once, touch wood, that I've had the police involved. So
yeah.
Obviously, social workers undergo lots of training. There is training available for managing difficult behaviour with families, both with adults and children services to do that piece of work. It also comes up when they do their child protection training. There's a 6-day course, and part of that is having difficult conversations with families and how people manage that. Because, the job is difficult, and sometimes the messages we're delivering is not always positive. And, sometimes people get angry because they're not happy with what they're hearing, but you obviously, we have to manage that within that meeting. So there's certainly a training available, which, social workers, do that quite regularly. And if social worker felt uncomfortable working in a particular situation, the manager or the senior within the team would attend the meeting with them to support them. or the principal officer would attend. And like Gayna's outlined, if a complaint was made about a social worker and we felt that there was any risk there, then the team manager, principal officer would step in and attend our complaints meeting.
Thank you ever so much, because it's quite reassuring for me to hear that individuals do get support, because it's not nice. And before I make my last on this, because I seem to have written quite a lot on this one, does anybody else have any questions they want to make? So I'm going to come to comments, because I have got a comment, and before I make my comment, would anybody else like to make a comment? No. So I would just like to say my comment was it is absolutely wonderful to have received so many compliments, and well done. You should all be so proud of you. And my second one was, do those complimented receive a formal letter from director highlighting positive? But you've already answered that, Lisa, and it is really positive. And I would just like to reiterate, thank you, Gayna, because I know your job is really stressful, and please thank Sarah from us as well, because it's not an easy job you've got. And with that, I'm going to see if you'd like to leave. You can.
Yes, thank you very much.
So thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll go to agenda item 4. So Lisa, oh sorry, Gayna, that was my fault then. So the report author is Lisa Curtis-Jones. So would you like to, with the absence of Julia, would you like to take the report, please?
Okay, so the second report is the annual report on social services 23-24. Scrutiny have already had the opportunity to go through the report in the workshop on the 30th of July, so we went through it in detail then. As you know, there's a request for myself as the director to write an annual report which feeds into Welsh Government and to Care Inspectorate Wales. So it comes to scrutiny once a year. It outlines the achievements and improvements from previous year and the priorities then for the following year. It links with the corporate plan, so what we've tried to do is obviously not have 2 different plans, because otherwise it just becomes really complicated. So there's similar themes, and we try to address those in the annual report. A copy of the report is shared with CIW. They use it as part of their inspection for the following year in any areas that they feel they need to look at in more detail. I will highlight that I think we've got a new inspector for next year. So we've shared the report with him. So he's looked at that and will come back to us when we have our annual meetings. This year there's an addition that we've now got a QR code attached, very technical, don't ask me how it works, but so that when it's published, members of the public will be able to comment using the QR code, which we haven't had before, so that's positive. This will be the last iteration of the report as it stands, because next year it's going to look slightly different with some different headings. And our business support manager, Judith, has been attending those meetings with Welsh Government. So next year it may be a bit more user friendly, but obviously we were using the template that we've done previously because we needed to meet a certain deadline. So appreciate you've had the opportunity sort of to go through it within the workshop, but happy to answer any questions.
Yes. Yeah. I was just wondering, I didn't notice in the report, perhaps it was there, how are you for staffing these days? Is there like a surplus of social workers in the country now, or are you just managing to fill your slots?
Councillor Tuffy, there is never a surplus of social workers. Dare I say it, at the moment we're okay. We've grown our own. So for children's services, we've had a number of vacancies within the family support team for a considerable length of time. So we've had to draw on resources from other areas to support that team for a short period of time. We've got, is it 5 or 6 social workers coming back qualified in October? 5. So they will fill those vacancies within that team. We've got a robust induction provided for them. And they will be within those vacancies in October. In the meantime, we've used agency staff to cover those vacancies. So at the moment, it's very positive. We had 1 vacancy in adult services, and there's a student who's qualifying now, September, October, who's filled our vacancy.
We haven't had to go out overseas in recent years, no?
No. Some of the neighbouring authorities have done that, but we've not been in a situation where we've needed to do it.
Oh, thanks.
Then Sam, and if you did put your hand up before, Councillor Tubby, I do apologise, I didn't see it, so I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
That's fine, Chair, no problem. Lisa, carrying on with the theme of media stories and probably getting away from your report a little bit, but because some of the things are mentioned within the report, dementia, older people and that sort of thing, you're obviously probably aware of the BBC Radio Wales interview this morning with the director of the Welsh NHS Confederation. And there's that little spat between him and Welsh Government, but he does turn around and say that councils need to step up. That's chief executives, directors of social services, and everyone else to help reducing waiting lists in hospitals. I'm just wondering if you have anything to add, maybe that how we can help on that, or anything, like, if you've got anything to add. Bear in mind, this might end up in a newspaper.
Yeah, I did see that on the news this morning, so I won't comment what I said to the telly. It's a difficult one. So when health are criticised by outside, bodies, I think their first defence is social care could do more. And I think social care do an awful lot, but I don't think that's always acknowledged. What I will say is there's a lot of work going on in the region at the moment through the Regional Partnership Board and through the Welsh Government scheme around Further Faster. I always get that wrong, but I think it's Further Faster. So that there are, through the winter pressures times, so there are, I'm trying to think what it's called, Care Committee Action. There are now targets through the autumn that we have to meet through the Health Board about reducing delays in transfers in hospital, increasing demand of district nurses on weekends to sort of prevent people going into hospital, and generally us working together with health. So I don't think it's necessarily a social care problem or health problem. I think we need to do more together. And I think that's the message we need to push back. So some of the work through the Regional Partnership Board is around that community integration. So we're trying to prevent people going into hospital, so there's not those delays there. So it's looking at what therapies are involved initially. So if somebody has a fall, do they need to be conveyed to the hospital? What could be done within their own home? So what, where that GP support is. And we've got the virtual ward system now in Cwmtaf Morgannwg, where GPs are talking to people online. So that sort of consultations happening sort of virtually before the person's taken to hospital, and equally when a person goes into hospital, the sooner they're discharged the better, because obviously their health doesn't deteriorate so much in hospital if they're there for a longer period of time. So the Health Board have just had agreement around having their own sort of DOMS care sort of support, and they'll offer packages of support for the first 6 weeks to get patients out of hospital quicker, and then obviously we'd pick up the package much later on. That's just been signed off by the Health Board, and the sort of practicalities and the operation of that are being worked out now within adult services, and Angela's been part of that group. And myself, as all the directors have. There's also going to be a ministerial visit in October to discuss where we're at on the Care Action Committee programme. So there is a lot of work going on at the moment around that area.
Okay, one last follow-on question for that. For us as a council then to be able to work with all our partners and to make sure that we try and keep people out of hospital in the first place, or those that are in hospital, to get them home sooner or get them into somewhere sooner. Is that likely to cost the council a lot of money? And if so, would you have any idea how much you're looking at?
In reality, we would try and do our best to keep people at home. As that's part of, sort of our ethos, that we want to keep people within their own home. Providing care within their own home is probably cheaper than if they end up in a care home. It isn't about cost, obviously, because it's about providing the best care for that person. And most older people want to be in their own home. They don't want to be in hospital. They don't want to be in a care home. They want to be in the community where they've been, born and bred, and where their support networks are and the areas they know. So I wouldn't know the cost of that, if I'm honest. I probably could break it down if I, thought about it. But most people want to be in their own home and, have a more of a positive outcome. So where we can, we'd support them in staying home.
Okay.
They only
Chair,
get
I've got.
paid to hospital if it's a real health need that we can't, support.
Okay, Chair, I've got one follow-on again, so I do apologise. A family member of mine is in hospital at the moment, and I've noticed that there are people in there. All right, they're fit and healthy, but they've got dementia. So really, they're not in the right place in on the wards. So just going on from that, you mentioned the care homes. Is there enough care home places in Merthyr Tydfil, to help with people that may be in hospital with dementia that are not physically um, uh, uh, that haven't got anything wrong with them physically, but so shouldn't be under wards, but can go into the care home, if you know what I mean. Sorry.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. The difficulties with that is depending on their assessment. So if they have no capacity to make decisions and their health need is such, then it probably requires a health placement, or nursing placement, I should say, not health placement. So therefore, we have got issues around capacity within nursing placements. If it was just residential care, then there are some vacancies. So obviously we would look at that. But if they've got dementia, it does depend on capacity and what the need is from the assessment. Sometimes they return home and they have respite. But that, again, that's about, what family support is available, to care for them 24/7. Some people go back to their own home because they do have capacity and they are able to, do some, care, and then they have respite and they have carers going in X amount of times a day. But it does generally depend on their assessment. And if their need is more nursing care, then there is a lack of capacity within that field.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. Any further questions? Any comments? Thank you, Councillor
I
Sevi.
think the biggest problem at the moment is when they altered the GP contracts in 2001. In those days, there was always a GP on call. I used to work in general practice for a year. Some would phone up who's 80 and say, I'm short of breath. You'd say, have you taken your tablets today? You'd say, no. Well, take your tablets and ring me back later if you're short of breath. Nowadays, they ring 111. They say, how old are you? 86. What's wrong? I'm short of breath. I'll call you an ambulance, And this is the problem. There's so many people coming to hospital now that if we had the old GP system, the GP wouldn't have to go out most of the time. But there's too many coming into hospital now that the GP in the old days would have treated themselves, and it's very time consuming in the hospital. And quite often you admit them for a short time. But this is what's blocking up all the beds, I think. It's not, I don't blame social services myself. It's the GP system, I think.
Can I just add, so the virtual ward work that Cwmtaf Morgannwg is doing has been really positive, and a lot of people have been prevented being conveyed to the hospital as a result of that. So I suppose a similar system to you're talking about, the patient's able to talk to a GP because there's a GP on call when they're doing that piece of work. So hopefully if they increase the, capacity within that service, you'll see a reduction again.
Yeah. I think they're doing a good job with this, but they don't know the patients, you see. This is the problem. Whereas before, you'd see them twice a week, and the person. But, I mean, they're doing their best as well. But
I've got one. My comment is, Lisa, on page 49, where at the end of the report, thank you ever so much for writing that comment down, thanking all your staff, because I read it and I thought that is such a positive thing to read. You know, I think anybody who works within social services, whether it's children or adults, it's a hard job and it's a thankless job, you know, and you don't expect it. So when I read that, it was so welcoming, and I thought, well done, Lisa. That's just wonderful, because when a member of staff, you know, if they do read it, they must think, oh, okay, you know. So thank you for that. It's really appreciated. Okay. So we'll go now. Agenda item 5, which is right care, right person. Obviously, Lisa has written it with Julia, not you. Are you going to take the report, Joe?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, Lisa is. Well done, Lisa.
It's all me today.
All you.
Okay, so Scrutiny requested this report. I think we talked about in previous meetings about right care, right person. So this was a project or initiative through the police. There are 4 stages to it. Phase 1 is concern for welfare. Phase 2 is the walk out of health facilities and absence without leave patients. Phase 3 is transportation of people with health-related needs in police vehicles. And phase 4 is police, I can't read my writing now, handovers of Mental Health Act and voluntary patients. So phase 1 went live in February 24, and phase 2 went live yesterday. So we haven't had a major impact on that yet, because we're only in day 2. And phase 3 and 4 have been delayed following engagement with other professionals till February 25. The report outlines sort of the detail of what those phases mean. Phase 1 is the only one really, I suppose, they've had chance to evaluate. And for the local authority, we've seen no consequences from the police not going out on welfare checks at the present time. We've run through some scenarios with the police about ones that perhaps have been raised as a concern, but they've explained their rationale for not going out on a welfare check. I think Children's Services had one example, but it ended up, there was a strategy meeting, so there was a joint visit at that stage. So it wasn't a welfare check as such, it was a child protection incident. Section 5 of the report outlines some of the data, so that gives you some sort of idea from a police resource about, you know, increasing the capacity within police by not going out on some of the welfare checks, and it's quite significant really, sort of the impact it's had for them. There's been various engagement events and evaluation that we've been invited to, and as like I've said, sort of because of the engagement events, the phases 3 and 4 have been delayed till February. There's further work going on at the moment about the impact that will have on social care. I think there's particular concern about the impact it's going to have on the mental health team, particularly going out. I mean, we've had one example where, you know, we had a person who was being sectioned, and if the police needed to go out to allow us to convey that person to the hospital, whereas under the new sort of right care, right person, the police may not come out on that. So it's about looking through those examples and, you know, what support would we have if that happened in the future. So we're still working through some of the detail there. But I think the report just outlines where we're at now and the information we've got to date. There is a national partnership group set up that's being chaired by the National Director for Mental Health. So obviously the concerns will be flagged there about phase 3 and 4. And our team manager, Alison Jones, is attending those meetings to flag on behalf of Merthyr Tydfil. So happy to answer any questions, but hopefully people have had a chance to read the report.
Thank you, Chair. Lisa, can you give us, you've given one example now of the mental health situation. Can you give the practical examples of each category? Because I'm not fully, not certain what they apply to or what they don't apply to.
I will do my best. So 4.4 of the report sets out the phases in detail.
Yeah.
So concern for welfare. So I don't know, it's a Friday night. Neighbour reports shouting at the next door address.
Yeah.
It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Social services about to close, and they're saying there's concerns there. We would ring the police and say, could you do a we've gone out, there's no concerns, but if there's concerns over the weekend, could the police go out and do a welfare check just to check things are okay? In the future, police won't do that. I mean, that's probably a lower level example.
Yeah.
But in the past, if you'd gone out on a Friday, 3 o'clock, to see a family, they weren't at home, neighbours say, oh, I'm seeing them for a day or two. We would say to the police, can you do a welfare check on the weekend? They would have done that. Moving on, they won't. So we'd have to go down a child protection route where there'd be a strategy meeting. There'd have to be a real safeguarding concern. So the message is, if there's concern about life, then obviously they'd go out. Child protection, they would go out, but for a welfare check, they won't. Absent without leave, missing from a healthcare setting. So say, for example, you've got a person who's been admitted to a ward, they discharge themselves or they leave the ward and they wander off. If hospital were concerned that they'd done that in the past, police would go looking for them. They wouldn't do that in the future.
This is where you said this is a health matter more there than...
So potentially, if they were known to us, we would be asked to sort of check the whereabouts, etc.
Yeah.
Totally different scenario. But if that person, I'm making this up, went and sat on a bridge and said they were going to jump, that is a matter of life and death. So the police would go out on that. So that wouldn't change, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Transportation. So like the example I gave, if there was an incident where we needed somebody was sectioned and that they wouldn't get into the social worker's car, and then in the past the police have arrived in a police van or car and they've gone in the police van, then they wouldn't do that in the future. That would be a social services matter and a health matter. And the section 136, again, around, they're very similar to transportation. It's about somebody being sectioned, and the police having to detain them under certain powers. So it's about us with the mental health, working with mental health social work team, working with the health team about what's appropriate to contact the police about.
With the section 136, is 136, I can't remember off the top of my head, is that where the police use their powers to take to a place of safety or whatever it is? Yeah. So why won't they use their powers in that situation? Why don't they,
Well, like they are.
Isn't
When
there
they
power
obviously
to take someone to...
They will still use their powers if they need to.
Yeah.
But I think there will be more of a recognition that healthcare professionals and social care need to. It's about transporting that person in a dignified way.
Yes.
Not being put in the back of a police
Yeah.
van. So I think he's moving away from what's appropriate transportation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa.
No, myself. So mine are the one question I do have. When you said just now about somebody leaving the hospital, and normally I've worked at the hospital, on the reception along behind Clive, and we've done that. I mean, I got to be honest, that's quite concerning, because I had to think back at the time that the one person got hit on the A465 because they were going, they were trying to get home. So with that, will that person, how are the hospital aware that that person potentially has that problem where they have to have interjection from yourself? So like, will the hospitals have EDT numbers, and things like that? Is there a process put in place that the because it's always down to the receptionist, Clive, isn't it? When somebody leaves and the nurses say, oh, they've gone and they shouldn't have, how will that receptionist know that they've got to contact somebody within our services to be able to respond?
So that's part of the reason there's been a delay in phases 3 and 4. because I think some of the feedback from partners has been them raising concerns about those phases. The phase 2 of the AWOL from hospital was delayed till now September, because they've been trying to work through those scenarios. So what will happen is there's a meeting every few weeks to look at specific cases. So if there was an incident today and it happened, then there's learning from it. Then that will be discussed at the meeting with partners, and they would look at what future iteration of that would look like, and where the resource would come from. So I know we've had an example where a young person, 17, went to A&E. I can't remember why they went to A&E, if I'm honest, but they left the hospital, but they left the hospital with their mother. So the police were saying, well, we wouldn't go out on that because they weren't at risk because they were on their own. Whereas in the past, the police would be called. So I think it's working through each case differently.
Yeah.
It won't be, like one size doesn't fit all is difficult to
Yeah.
explain, really. But if there was a feeling that somebody's left the ward in their pajamas and it's the middle of the night and there's a mental health risk, then that is a concern about life. So therefore the police would go out on it.
Yeah, okay.
So there is some reassurance there, but I think there are the low level cases, like that young girl who left the hospital, who was deemed to be at risk and then didn't seek medical advice, but her mother was with her. So it was about, well, what are the police going to do different? We could speak to the mother and make sure she brings them back to the hospital. So each case is going to be very different, I think.
Yeah, I've got something. To me, it's quite concerning to hear that police may not be involved when a team go sectioning. I mean, because sometimes they're not only there for transport, they're there because it's going to be a volatile situation. So I'm just wondering, the social workers that are going to attend section, knowing that there are not going to be police involvement, what are they going to have put in place to safeguard themselves? I mean, it's all well and good, they've got a mobile phone, but I know sometimes we just say, oh, if you go in somewhere, we've just got to, if you don't phone us by this time, we will be ringing you. If you don't answer that phone, we will be visiting. So I know we put things in place, but I'm just wondering, because it is quite scary if you're part of that sectioning team, no police present, and the person being sectioned is extremely volatile.
I think in that circumstance, where there's a potential risk, you're still going to have police involvement, because if there's a chance that a member of staff is going to be assaulted, then that's what the police are there for. That protection element. We wouldn't expect staff to go out on their own when they potential risk like that. There would be a risk assessment. Potentially you're going to have the consultant, the GP there, because you have to have a health input for a section, and you'd have 2 members of the team from the mental health team. And I would hope that staff wouldn't put themselves at risk, that, it's about what message we're giving to the police about the level of risk. I mean, if the phone call to the police says we need help with transport, then that is a lower level risk. If a member of staff is ringing to say that person, is in the house, we can't go in because we're concerned about our safety, then that's a different referral. Okay. So I think it's about how we refer it through to the police, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you ever so much. Any comments?
I was just going to say, I can quite understand why the police want to introduce this, really, because the amount of time the police used to spend looking for people and waiting in A&E, there's usually more police in A&E that are out on the roads, really. And a lot of these people that abscond, they've been to A&E 40 times, always threatening to commit suicide. And it comes to a stage where the police have got to say, for some of these individuals, we just can't keep going out looking for them, So in principle, and I'll say this with the police, generally, they do use some common sense, as you've alluded to, like this week alone, we had someone going berserk on GHB. It took about 9 people to hold him down till we could sedate him, and there was some police there then. So I think the police will act responsibly with this, but I think I can understand why they want to cut down the number of visits, you know. But, you know, it is a difficult one, though, I must admit.
Councillor Turvey. So now we've got agenda item, I can't even speak, agenda item 6. So before we go into agenda item 6, would you and Joe like to leave?
Thank you very much.
You can stay, you're more than welcome. No? Okay.
Not late for another meeting.
Thank you ever so much. I'm sorry I've kept you.
In America now, they talk about social workers, where there's someone going berserk for the night or a day. They say they want a social worker to go out and calm them, like, you know.
Thank you, I really appreciate that. So agenda item 6 is the forward work programme. I haven't got much to say with that, if I'm honest. Is there anything I need to...
We've got some workshops.
Yeah, we've got... Is that... I've got it here, haven't I? Yeah. I've got to be honest, I welcome this. The joint workshop for learning toileting. I just think this is going to be... it's something that we really need to do. Have we got a date for that yet, or is it?
November. I'm going to look for a date in November.
November. Can we... Because obviously now I don't know. Can I just... I haven't got my November rota, but as soon as I get it, could we try and work around me? Because I really need... I feel quite strongly about this at the moment. And I really would like to attend, so you know.
Which one's this, Claire?
It's the joint workshop that we're hoping to have with education for toileting. Yeah, it's causing quite a few issues, I think, within schools at the moment, and I think it's been quite prevalent and it's been highlighted, and I think it's important to have that joint workshop together. So once you get the dates, then we can just work on that. So I have nothing further for the forward work programme.
Next meeting.
So
Okay.
So our next meeting is going to be the 5th of November. Obviously, things will change by then, so whoever is going to be the new chair, I welcome them, and I hope to be still on scrutiny for social services then. Agenda item 6, scrutiny referrals, I have none. Agenda item 7, report recommendations, I have none. This is for the forward work programme, I don't have any. Agenda item 8, feedback on scrutiny activities. Again, I think I will reiterate what I said earlier, that how appreciative Councillor Louise Minute-Vaux is towards yourself. This would have been Louise's, Councillor Minute-Vaux' last scrutiny, and I would just like convey again her thanks to you, Jane, and to the officers, and to Julia Jenkins, and to all of you on the scrutiny panel. Just she's very grateful, and thank you for everything you've all done for us. So I'll just convey that again. So thank you so much. I did it without crying. Well done, me.
We had licensing exactly the same time. That I forgot to send it. It was exactly the same time, and so
no, that's fine. That's fine. I'm sure we can speak to Democratic Services about that if there was a conflict in pre-meet. So, you know. So thank you for bringing that up, Clive. Any other business? Agenda item 9. Anything? So with that, I'm going to say thank you all so much for attending. Just in case I don't come here again, I really appreciate you myself, and I do appreciate you, Jane, and Democratic Services, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks.
And well done.
Mr. Salmon, speak to you soon.